welcome to Turn the Page, the official podcast of the Syosset Public Library.
Hello, and welcome to another chapter of Turn the Page, the official podcast of Syosset Public Library. I am Jenn, your host for today, and I'm here with the author of a really great new graphic novel. Could I ask you to introduce yourself and your book, please?
Hi, my name is Balazs Lorinczi. I'm a Hungarian comic book artist, but I live in Scotland for years now. And I'm the author, the artist, and writer of Doughnuts and Doom, which is an upcoming graphic novel from Top Shelf IDW. Comes out in September.
Great, thank you. I am also a top shelf author, as we were talking about a little bit before we started, and It's really exciting to see another great witchy book from Top Shelf. Could I ask you, this is your first published graphic novel, and I'm wondering how you got to this point. Have you written before? What was your career like up to this point?
Okay, try to make it as short as possible and not that boring. So I studied animation, and then in my early 20s, and then I went to study filmmaking as well, but I decided not to pursue filmmaking because I prefer to sit at a table and stare at a computer. So I got a job in animation, which I've done for like a year and a half. And then after that, I've done freelancing, mainly for illustration. And then I moved to Scotland. I tried to do illustration as well on the side, but I had to get a day job, and then there was a big gap. And after that, 2 years ago now, started drawing Doughnuts and Doom. And in the meantime, I was always doing comics on the side. We tried to do like a semi-regular online magazine in Hungary, which was over like 10 years ago now, almost. It kind of died down after a few issues, and then I was doing like a couple of short things here and there for a. I live in Dundee in Scotland, and there was a Dundee based indie like publication for comics, which is like every 3 months or so, called Treehouse. So I've done a couple of short comics for that, but nothing longer than 23 pages at a time before that. So during lockdown, what was it, March 2020, if I remember correctly? I started, because I was furloughed from my day job, I started doing a little comic just to keep myself occupied. And then after I finished that, I realized I miss drawing all the time and I need to draw all the time. So I'm just going to start drawing a comic and then let's see where it goes. I thought I'm going to do 50 pages of it or something and then put it up online, and that's it. And then Doughnuts and Doom was the end product, basically. Happened to draw 130 pages.
Wow. Yeah, that's a big jump from writing shorter comics. Did you find that there was it a really different process for you writing something much longer than the shorter stuff you had worked on?
Yes, but in a good way. So when I was doing comics before, how to put it, to not to put myself down, but to explain it. Basically, I don't think I had the emotional maturity to write something like longer that has a proper narrative. And I always got bogged down in world building and trying to imitate artists that I liked or writers that I liked. And when I reached the point that I started doing Doughnuts and Doom, I was in a headspace when I think I was thinking more clearly, and I could basically follow the rule of keep it simple, stupid. People like to say when they write stories, and I'm like, okay, I just need to write something that's like genre fiction that tells something really simple and clear and not get bogged down in anything else. So because I think mentally I hit that point, I had less trouble writing something longer. And also I wrote it in chunks as well. So I had a starting point and I had an end point that I know I have to reach. But a lot of stuff in the middle kind of developed as I was like sketching up, doing the thumbnails and all that. Like a good like 60 pages of the story in the middle is kind of like I came up with it as I was thumbnailing, but I think because of the nature of the story, it fit in there. So I don't think that's noticeable, but that helped me to kind of like finish this longer thing and not be like too intimidated by it.
That's really interesting. And it's a cool way to approach a longer work, to sort of break it up like that. And something that I think you touched on that's really interesting is that, making comics isn't always linear, like there's so many phases, and it's not like you finish one phase like thumbnailing and then go on to the next one and then go on to the next one. Like you can go back and forth between phases.
Oh, yeah.
So how do you how do you approach like time management when you're working on a big project like that?
So that's a very good question, because I just started to work on a new thing and I thought, oh, I'm just going to thumbnail the whole thing. It's going to be whatever, 150, 200 pages. I'm going to blast through the thumbnails and then I can just focus on the pencils and the inking and the colors and everything, because that's where I hit Zen, and that's where I'm like, okay, I just put on a podcast, put on an audio book, and just drawing. Don't need to think. Thinking is hard, because when I have to think of the dialogue and the story, that's when I'm like, okay, like this is it. This is when it comes out of my brain, it goes onto the page, and that's it. And I need to make sure that I get it right. But when I started the new story, I realized I can't do that. I cannot do 200 pages of thumbnails. It just gives me anxiety. So I tend to I do it in chunks. So when I started Doughnuts and Doom, I'd done like 10 pages at a time. Depends. I meant to do it as a webcomic because I never thought anyone would publish it. So I went in like 10, 15 page sections. And when I hit around like page 90 or 80, I thought, okay, this is the end of the story, the big third act. So I just blasted through that 40 or so pages in a couple of weeks doing the thumbnailing. But I felt more comfortable because I kind of knew that, okay, this is going to be the end of it. And I'm not just going to be sitting here for 2 months just trying to sketch up thumbnails. But I usually tend to go like 10, 15 pages, do thumbnails, do the dialogue on the page. I really need to see how the dialogue works on the page with the drawings. So I tend not to write detailed scripts before that. I have notes. I have like crucial dialogues written down, but that's it. I work it out on the page. So I'm going to get a good flow. And then after that, I just do one by one every page in that section that I already thumbnailed up, do the pencils, do the inks, do the colors. And when I finish the whole story, I go back to page one and just correct everything that I don't like. See it with a fresh eye. Also, after you draw like 100+ pages, depends on where you are with your art journey. If you're where I am, you're gonna be hopefully a better artist than you were at page one after like page 130. So it's good to go. For me, it was good to go back to the first page and be like, okay, I think I could have done this drawing better, and just kind of adjust it.
That's a really good point. Because I remember, when me and my friend and art partner were working on a web comic, when it was into its later years, she would look back at the earlier work and be like, oh my gosh, I'm so embarrassed. Like it's not as good as it is now. And I would always tell her, like, that's a good thing though, like it would be it would be much worse if the end of the comic 4 years later looked exactly like the beginning of the comic, but that's a hard thing to incorporate into one work, your progress as an artist.
I completely understand their feelings, because I have I think every artist has the same, and they look back at something that they'd drawn just like a couple of years before and think like, oh my goodness, what was I thinking putting those lines on the page? And then because now they are so much better, but then you're going to think that 2 years after now, looking back at your current self as well.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And it can happen in almost any medium, because I started interviewing people like almost a year ago. And when I went back to listen to my first episode, I was like, oh gosh, I was so nervous. don't sound good. I wasn't asking good questions, but like just by doing something a lot, you naturally get better at it without even trying.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I very much noticed that with art. It's one of the what is saying, like how many hours you have to put in, 10,000 hours you have to put in to get good at something. And I don't necessarily agree with that with everything, but I definitely noticed that with my art, that the more I do it, the better I get at it, and hopefully I still gonna get better, because I still don't think I'm that good, but I think I'm good enough to do, well, it seems like I'm good enough to do a comic book.
I think so.
Well, top shelf thought so as well, thankfully. So
um so yeah, let's talk about this book, because I enjoyed Doughnuts and Doom so much.
thank
um
you.
my favorite thing about it, I think, is all of the characters and their relationships, because they're really fun, but they're also very real. They're messy, and they change a lot, and it's sometimes vague or ambiguous. And I'm wondering, like, what came first for you? Was it the individual characters, or was it the relationships and the dynamics, if that makes sense?
Yeah. It might be a disappointing answer, but the first thing that I came up with was the second scene technically in the shop. The whole premise of the book. I had this short little story in my mind. I was like, oh, it would be funny if I used to work in a fast food place, just to put it in context, for years. And I was like, oh, it would be funny if a witch came in and had a moment there that many fast food customers have, that they just kind of lose their temper because they couldn't get what they wanted. And what would a witch do? Curse something. And I was thinking, oh, a cursed donut, funny. That was it. But the witch I started sketching out the story, but it was nothing like Doughnuts and Doom. I just thought, oh, that's a good premise. I like that. It's fun, it's funny, but I had no idea where to take it from there. It took me, like, I don't even know, maybe a year or so. I can't even remember. But when I've done a little short comic during the period when I was furloughed, and that was like a short, sort of like a little romance story, nothing special. It was a guy dating a ghost girl. I'm like, oh, I like to do this. I like to just this like rom-com. I'm like, what if I do a rom-com, but with that premise I had? What can I do with it? Should I focus on the donut's journey, how it like people interact with the donut? And I was like, or what if I just keep it simple, as I said, and just, okay, you have the employee who has to have an argument with the witch. What if they have a moment together? What if, and then that's where it started. And I realized, okay, these two characters have to be the main characters, and it has to be a romantic comedy with them. And after that, everything just kind of started emerging from that, like a primordial soup was the original concept, and everything emerged from that. As soon as I assigned a genre to the whole thing, I could come up with other ideas and characters that fit that genre, which is a way I really like to think. I really enjoy, even when I talk about movies or any other medium, when I can like explore like a genre, and like what can you do, breaking the boundaries of genres or just sticking within them. I really like tropes as well.
Yeah, I like that, because I think that, knowing a genre really well, or being very familiar with all of the tropes in a genre, can help you out even when you want to go against those tropes. It's like you have to
Yeah,
know the rules before you break them a little bit.
absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, and I love that the way that this book plays with genre, because it is, a rom-com, and it's really fun, but it doesn't like start out that great for our two main characters. Like, they don't really have a meet cute. Like, it's more of like a meet bad, or like like it's like they get off on the wrong foot. But I think the story does a really good job of showing how, like, first impressions aren't necessarily everything, and that you can, relationships change. They don't have to like remain the way that they start.
Yeah, yeah, they go on a bit of a personal journey, but it's more of a, not a meet cute. It's kind of the enemies to lovers type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
That's the big trope. A couple of years ago, I think in YA fiction was a big thing. but it's still to this day, like enemies to friends or enemies to lovers. I love that trope. I don't know why, just the dynamic of that, like how much they hate each other and then it turns into something else. That's what I tried to play with. And then the book I was working on after that was even more so that, because I just enjoyed that setup so much that I tried to push it even further.
That's really interesting to me because it is interesting that the way that they meet, they are sort of like enemies at first, but like even anger or hatred or not even, or just like frustration are like very strong emotions, very strong like attachments to another person, so it does like create a connection in a weird way that can then like the nature of that connection can change. um I love the main characters, like they're so much fun, and I'm wondering how you obviously, like, how did you choose to have the focus be magic and also music, because one of the main characters is a musician.
Yeah. Well, magic stuff is like one of my favorite like subgenres or like settings. You can do a lot of things with magic. Like I love other subgenres as well. Like science fiction is great, but I always felt more comfortable with magic, and also it gives me like that cozy feeling, especially like fantasy and urban fantasy. Like love urban fantasy settings. So I knew that I want to do something like that because I feel most comfortable drawing real life things. Although I would love to do like medieval type fantasy as well one day. Um, but so okay, so like I was thinking, okay, I want to do something that's like current day or fairly modern times at least. Put magic in it because that just spices things up, makes things more interesting. I really like witches. It's just one of those things I see any type of like story has a witch in it. I'm like interested or like right the get go. But I love all type of magical creatures. I always loved them, even when I was little and I was freaked out by vampires or werewolves in movies. I was like attracted to them. So I'm trying to do like further stories as well with those type of creatures. Sorry, the question got away from me. I kind of just rambling here.
No, that's okay. I really like where
Uh,
it went. And I think you're,
music. Sorry, I remember the rest of the question. Music.
mm,
So yeah, I used to play music. Used to be in bands. So Eleanor's story with her whole struggle with her band is kind of like it comes from personal experience. So that's why I was like, okay, things I like, magic, witches, and things I know about. Some things about music because you're supposed to write about what you know, or at first at least. So
mm.
that's where it came from, basically.
Oh, cool. Okay. Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. And I think that even the pairing, like magic and music together, like is a very interesting and useful like comparison, because they are like kind of alike in some ways. Like they are
Yeah,
passions for the people who pursue them. They kind of like create something out of nothing, and they are like uh yeah, both like complex arts that you like devote your life to. And I think it's nice to see two characters who are like developing a relation with each other but also have a really strong passion for what they do with their life.
yeah, that was important to me. To both of them have something going for them to create like an equal dynamic because both have their personal issues, but both of them have a field that they are like talented in. So
Mm,
that it won't feel like that one of them is kind of the cool girl and the other one is the lame one.
mm.
Both have their strengths and weaknesses. Maybe Margot have the witch one have a bit more weaknesses, but ultimately when it comes to her chosen field, what she's good at, she's really good at it.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that even, Margot's weaknesses um are like a very nice compliment to Ella. Is it Elena or Elena?
Elena,
Elena.
you know what? Don't ask me. I just wrote it down. So English is my second language. I say Elena.
Okay, that's what I said in my head too when I was reading. So um and like they are good compliments for each other, because Margot is really talented, but she's kind of insecure in her talents and she's very nervous about performing. And Elena um has a lot of confidence, and a
Yeah,
lot of talent, and is not
a bit
really
too
afraid of
much.
performing.
Yeah, she just have those barriers. That was one of the parts when I really kind of dug down in my memories, like how it went for us, and that was to me the things I can most relate to when I was coming up with the characters. Like, she's good at it. She's better than I was when I was in a band, but still can get the band to go in. Basically, can book like gigs, can get people to go to their gigs, and that's one of those like barriers that I think a lot of creatives and I still struggle with it to this day with my art to get to put your art in front of an audience. And that was a thing that when I was doing a band that we really struggled with. So I thought, okay, I'm gonna take that part because I very well know it and give that little character arc to Elena. So that's gonna be her struggle.
Yeah, I think that their journeys or their struggles complement each other in very interesting ways. And I'd like to talk a little bit about something that you touched on before on the magic aspect and the world building, because I love I also love stories about magic and witches, and I really love when those magic stories are placed in like realistic settings and in like even urban settings, you know, like the sort of like they live in like a bustling uh little like town. And so I'm wondering, like, how do I phrase this?
Just put it as bluntly as you can.
What was your but what was your approach to world building, and how did you decide which details to include and which ones not to?
My most dreaded question. My approach to world building was not to world build. Because as I mentioned earlier, when I was younger, I was really impressed by comic book authors or prose authors or directors or whatever, screenwriters who can like do really good world building with really like high concepts. Like I was really into like comic books like Planetary from Warren Ellis and just trying to think like Alan Moore stuff, you know, like it's like super elaborate like words like Alan Moore's Top 10.
Oh
I don't
yeah.
know if you read that. Like
Mhm.
you know, like huge worlds, and I thought, oh, I want to do this, but then at the end of the day, I barely managed to put together a narrative because I was so bogged down with like what should I include, what should be the cool thing in
Mm.
it. So when I started to come up with Doughnuts and Doom, I thought, no world building. I only gonna world build as much as I have to for the whole story to work. So I was halfway through it, or even further, when I was trying to think back at some things, like for example, the whole. I don't know if you remember that there's a whole little bit about familiars
Yes.
when Margot explains how familiars work and why her snake familiar is so intelligent. And that was kind of like on the fly because I'm like, okay, that would fit here, and it would kind of explain why the snake is so friendly.
Mm.
But I didn't come up with it before I started writing the whole story. It wasn't like an integral part. The integral parts were the personal journeys and what steps they have to go through to reach their destination in the third act. Every other like world building was just what I had to do. So there are a lot of questions I think that you can. It's a simple story. It's 130 pages. It's a fluffy, breezy story. But if you start thinking about it, there's a lot of questions you can ask, like, wait, witches are just a thing in this world? How does the economy work then? Like stuff like that. I don't know. I don't care. I don't think that matters. If I write a sequel, I would explore that, but it doesn't sound interesting to me. The interesting thing to me was to have these characters have their personal journeys and have fun and provide something that's fun for the readers. And I'm going to explain everything that I need to explain, but I'm not going to go into details and have like big like charts drawn up and everything like a Jonathan Hickman story. No, this on Jonathan Hickman. Like he's great. He does those like detailed charts. I could never do that. Like I don't, you know what I mean?
For sure. Yeah, it's like there are kind of two different approaches to world building. And I feel like the one that we're talking about right now is like first you create the world with all its details and all of its complexity, and then
Yeah.
you put characters in it. But I think the style that you've been talking about here that you use is kind of more like you you start with the characters and then you let the needs of their story kind of shape what you tell the reader about the world, you know?
Yeah. And then after a while, it becomes organic, because sometimes you're like, okay, well, this world needs to have certain things, so that might can affect what happens in the story and to the characters, but that's not the priority. Like compared to your story, An Embarrassment of Witches, which is such a like, I feel like you guys did a much like more detailed world building than I did.
Well, that took us 6 years to write. We worked on it way too long.
Holy
So
moly.
yeah.
I mean, you can tell because it's filled to the brim with ideas, like every little page.
Oh, thank you. You know, I think that
I really enjoyed it.
they're very nice complementary works, and I really think it's kind of cool that like this is like a storytelling place that we're kind of in right now, you know, where we can play with these fantasy worlds and with cool magic concepts and interesting creatures and all that kind of stuff, but still tell really meaningful stories about like people and emotions and relationships, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that's ultimately what makes 99% of stories great. Like you can have a really well-built world and like cool drawings or cool special effects, but if the story doesn't affect you personally, like you don't care about the characters, it rarely works. It's a rare occasion when you watch something and you're like, well, the characters suck, the plot sucked, but those spaceships were cool, and then you kind of like gonna love it because of that. Like I think it's rare. It happens, but I think more often than not, you watch something and you're gonna love it because you feel for the characters and want them to succeed, or or just don't want them to fail.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that like, you know, all of the set dressing stuff can be in its own way impressive, or not to like, you know, as you said, like not to diss it because that stuff is all really cool. But
Ton
like
of work went into that. Like, yeah, I really respect all that.
yeah, absolutely. And like it's but I think what makes it memorable is when those elements are in support of character driven stories, you know?
Yeah, best
Well, I
example I can think of is Spider-Verse, I think, because that's like a gorgeous, gorgeous movie, but ultimately it's about Miles Morales' journey, and just that's the main thing you're watching it for.
yes. Oh, that's a perfect example. Yeah,
I
there's
love
like
that movie so much.
so good. It's like just the most like breathtaking piece of animation I feel like I've seen in a very, very long time. And I
it
can't wait
is
to
it
see it.
is breathtaking, but the story is like so well put together as well.
Yes, yeah. And the characters have very they're just very real, and their relationships all feel like they matter to the story. I think that's an important thing too.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
there's like like three main characters and a couple of additional ones, and all have their little journeys they go through. Like brilliant. That's something that I always look at as like a prime example of storytelling. Where it's like you don't feel like it's just functional. Like you don't feel like you're going through the steps. It's crammed. It's filled to the brim with good stuff. It's almost overflowing. But at the
Mm,
same time, when you watch it, you don't think about that. You just think about like, oh, this character has to achieve this. This character have to achieve that. And I think that's like a very, very good example of how good stories are written in general.
yeah, absolutely. So can I ask you what's next for you? Are you working on anything at the moment?
Yeah, yeah, I can't stop working, it seems like, in the last couple of years. I feel like I took a long break and now I'm just kind of overdoing it. But I just finished an almost 180-page graphic novel,
Ooh.
um, which I'm about to pitch to some publishers. So hopefully someone's gonna buy it. I was
Oh,
kind of waiting on Doughnuts and Doom to come out, and then I can use that as a look. I'm a published author. Would you want to buy my second graphic novel? So I'm about to do that, and started working on my third graphic novel
ooh,
just a couple of weeks ago.
that's great. Well, I am so excited to read the second one. I wish you luck with the search. Yeah, because I know
Well, thank you.
yeah, it's a process, but I really hope we get to see it soon. And I wanted to thank you so much for coming to talk to our show. I really love this book, and I really love talking to other people in comics. It's really great.
Well, thank you very much. I'm really glad you like the book, and thank you very much for having me. And hopefully, my ramblings weren't too incomprehensible.
Not at all. They were very comprehensible. Okay. All right, listeners. You can pick up Doughnuts and Doom as of the publication of this episode. I highly suggest that you do, because it's a really good time and just a really beautiful book. For now, we will close this chapter. I'll see you next time.
It's time to close this chapter of Turn the Page. Join us for the next episode.